Golf. It is the sport that has been attributed to the likes of wealth, fame, fortune, and status. It's a gentleman's game, a game rooted in tradition. The world's celebrities, politicians, and superstars have at all some point been photographed playing a game of golf. Perhaps it's the simplicity of the sport, the cost, or the players and company that has created the impression that golf makes you a powerful person. But just like any other game with rules, golf makes you follow suit in what you're supposed to do. There's traditions, morals, and respect in a game of golf. The sport has an atmosphere of business and reason that attracts any social status. But in September of 1967, someone took that prestigious look of golf, a sport of rules, a classy sport, a sport the rich dare not sabotage, and drove it through a window in a Las Vegas casino. Ladies and gentlemen, let me please introduce the lovely, the talented, the chairman of the board, Frank Sinatra. It would be difficult to sum up Frank Sinatra's life in a title. Some call him the most influential artist of the 20th century, others call him the definition of a womanizer. But to me, Frank Sinatra has far surpassed these titles. To me, he is the embodiment of chaos in the American entertainment industry. A man who showed more confidence than a politician, more ego than a politician, and more hypocrisy than, well, a politician. Sinatra lived 1,000 lifetimes in one, filled with stories that many of us can only dream of, and yet people don't talk about it nearly enough. So sit down, try and relax, and take a journey with me into the insane, egotistical, and bizarre lives of Frank Sinatra.
Yeah?
Good morning. My name is Frank Sinatra.
What?
Before the fame, the glory, and the star status that Sinatra had created, life tried to kill him before he even got to burn the industry to the ground. Born on December 12th of 1915, Sinatra was presumed dead at birth, laid blue and unconscious on a kitchen countertop of his parents' New Jersey apartment while his mother was tended to by the doctor. It would be his grandmother that would save his life, running him under cold water and slapping his back to get him breathing again. Scars would ingrain themselves into his face, deep cuts that were caused by the use of forceps during his birth. And by some miracle, Martin Sinatra survived the complicated start of his life. Martin would recover with his mother over the following days and would be baptized a Catholic. Except, there would be a slight problem. Martin Sinatra was never baptized. Frank Sinatra would be the name assigned to him, the priest confusing the name of his father, Martin, to that of his godfather, Frank. The first hole of Sinatra's life's golf course was a par 5. Let's fast forward a couple years, and talk about two boys and a piano.
Hey, Bing, this isn't the type of number for this kind of a production.
What kind of a production is this?
A super special production.
Well, I guess you're right. We should get out of the mud and reach for the higher and the finer things of life. The silver lining, the bluebird, and life and love.
In the mid-1920s, famous singers Bing Crosby and Al Rinker would drop everything they had and move to the City of Angels. Quickly becoming popular in the area, the duo dubbed their act Two Boys and a Piano. Playing a multitude of shows along the West Coast, it wouldn't be too long after that the stars, along with songwriter Harry Barris, would create one of the most prominent jazz shows of the 20th century. And to little Frank Sinatra, this would be his inspiration.
There are red lights round to warn you when you're in a danger zone, but when it comes to love you on your own, that romantic moon will help me, and the stars that shine above.
As a member of his high school's glee club and with a starstruck dream of performing, Frank would soon gain the confidence to set out to sing at nightclubs in the local area, including performances with the Three Flashes. Which leads us to one of the biggest discoveries made about Sinatra, one that wasn't found out by the public until 2011. As one of his first public performances, Sinatra starred in an adult film at the age of 19. He was paid $100 to appear as the character The Masked Bandit, and when he was famous, allegedly used his power with the mob to wipe the movie from ever surfacing. More on that later, by the way. Little did he know that these performances would be the start of his life completely changing, because a trumpet player by the name of Harry James, yeah, that Harry James, would find a liking to the Sinatra sound, and before he could even realize it, Sinatra had become a teenage sensation.
Ben Hogan has achieved a breakthrough in golf shaft design. The revolutionary Legend shaft. This exclusive Ben Hogan innovation combines...
He was on an album cover with me once, a long time ago. Matter of fact, he's been a good friend. It's funny, when I first met him, I didn't like him.
The year is 1940, and the start of a new era that would become one of the most famous in history, and one that Sinatra would dominate. Roosevelt would become the first president ever elected to a third term. Germany would invade much of Europe, and the US would end up getting involved with the conflict in December of 1941. While fighting overseas, however, the music of young Sinatra would be ringing in every American's ears. Sinatra would release the song All or Nothing at All to mass success, his first major hit. It topped the charts, broke him finally into the threshold of celebrity status, and everyone knew the name Sinatra. He would eventually fight a legal battle with the Tommy Dorsey Band, one he joined in 1939 that wanted 43% of his lifetime earnings in the entertainment industry. He would end up winning the case and set out on his solo career. But, see, that isn't exactly how the story goes. In fact, the song All or Nothing at All was never meant to be famous. It was a flop when it first released.
Somebody in for a licking?
You bet. Look at smear.
Yeah, but 10 against 1. That's not very fair. Now, hold on. I see what you mean. You must be a bunch of those Nazi werewolves I've been reading about.
In 1939, All or Nothing at All would release and become a massive flop. And by flop, I mean it sold less than 8,000 copies. You see, in the late 1930s, a music publisher would approach famous songwriter Jack Lawrence with a request to write lyrics for a new melody created by Arthur Altman. I know a lot of names, just stick with me here. He agreed, stating, "I knew it would be a wonderful song for singers, and I was intrigued, and I kept working away at it until I finally came up with this title, All or Nothing at All." Little did Lawrence know, this would create one of the most bizarre recording stories of the time. What ended up happening is 3 major artists of the time recording 3 renditions of the song, competing with one another for the glory. The horses in this race? Some of the biggest jazz sensations of the time. Freddie Martin, Jimmy Dorsey, and the Harry James Orchestra, with Frank Sinatra singing, all put in to win it all. At the young age of 23, Sinatra was caught in a whirlwind of recording history. And the worst thing about it all? None of these recordings were successful, and the song that caused a frenzy of recordings would fade out of existence. Until 1943. You see, sometimes claims to fame can truly just depend on being in the right place at the right time. Sure, Sinatra had lots of fans by this point, he was a teenage sensation. But how could this song catapult him into stardom? To answer that question, let me introduce you to the American Federation of Musicians, and more specifically, how they decide to outright ban new recordings to be recorded in 1943. The Federation decided to do this mainly because they wanted more pay and benefits for professional musicians, and to do this, they needed to make a statement. At this time, record companies were just hoping that the record ban would get swept under the rug, overpowered by the news coverage of World War II. In order to keep new music coming out, however, old songs were being pushed front and center. And with America's sweetheart not recording any new records for them, the recording company Columbia would dig into the vault. And none other than All or Nothing at All was waiting for them. And it exploded. It sat on the charts for 18 weeks, made millions, and reached number 2 in the US on June 2nd of 1943. And because of one song being thrown out of the garbage, Sinatra's career would be sent to the stratosphere, and his solo career would make it go interstellar.
His name appearing on a government wiretap. On that tape, an alleged organized crime figure is overheard asking someone to contact Sinatra and see if he can get work for singer Al Martino in Las Vegas.
So, fast forward a couple years again, and Sinatra is doing his thing. He's releasing hit after hit after hit and destroying the charts. He's starring in movies such as Anchors Away, Till the Clouds Roll By, and It Happened in Brooklyn. Sinatra is the celebrity, and if you wanted to crack at the top, you had to go through him. Which leads us to our next destination, Sinatra's weird and mysterious relationship with the mob. In 1943, a letter would show up on the FBI's doorstep. Its contents would contain why the author believed Frank Sinatra's music was causing hysteria within the youth of America, specifically teenage girls. Quote, how easy it would be for certain-minded manufacturers to create another Hitler here in America through the influence of mass hysteria. To this day, the letter's author has never been revealed, and so started a scavenger hunt over the next 40 years, culminating over 1,300 pages of rumors, ties, and dead ends. It is uncertain where and how Sinatra first got involved with the criminal underworld. It seems as though many sources have a different explanation for his first involvement. So here's what I think. Remember that whole thing about how Sinatra had to break up with Tommy Dorsey to embark on his solo career? Rumor has it that Dorsey wasn't going to budge, no matter how much money Sinatra threw at him. So what's odd is that inexplicably, one day in 1943, Dorsey dropped everything and decided to part ways. Why would he do that? He owned Sinatra and thus owned a massive haul from his superstardom. In steps Willie Moretti, a notorious underboss, cousin to Frank Costello, yeah, that Frank Costello, and godfather to that of Frank Sinatra. It was reported that Moretti had helped Sinatra in his early career, getting him those gigs around the New Jersey area when he was in his teens. It is rumored that Sinatra reached out to Moretti to help him split with Dorsey, and in order to make a deal happen, Moretti held a gun to Dorsey's head and made him choose. Nobody knows for certain if this happened or not, but the fact that Dorsey just dropped everything doesn't make this rumor seem too far off. Not even 3 years later, Sinatra would be present at the Mafia Havana conference in 1946. And so, only in his late 20s, Sinatra was with the Mafia. Allegedly.
October 4th, 1895, Newport, Rhode Island. A chilly day dawned as the wind whipped in hard off the Atlantic. The inaugural U.S. Amateur had been played the day before, and many of those competitors, some scions of America's industrial age, stayed around to watch and wager on a ragtag group of 10 professionals.
Frank Sinatra, a man and his music, featuring the orchestras of Nelson Riddle and Gordon Jenkins, playing the music of the man called Sinatra.
I am Robin Hood.
Our story continues in the year 1957, where Sinatra found himself in a renaissance of his career. You see, it is no mistake that I skipped a large portion of the 1950s, as Sinatra's claim to fame was slowly starting to fade. As with many in the entertainment industry, it seemed as though his time was up in the spotlight. Until he became the leader of a little-known group called the Rat Pack. Originating in the late 40s, the Rat Pack would stem from a group of friends in New York. The infamous name's origins have many theories, the most popular being member Humphrey Bogart's wife saying, "You look like a goddamn Rat Pack," when the friends returned late at night. Many famous persons would visit the Rat Pack, including the likes of Elizabeth Taylor, Tony Curtis, and Lena Horne. The pack would go through several different transformations over the years, and with the passing of the group's leader, Humphrey Bogart, the future of the group was up in the air. With the passing of one legend, another was bound to take his place. Frank Sinatra found himself leading the group in 1957.
It's about time you got started.
Now wait a minute, Big Buster.
Now you wait a minute and listen to me very carefully, my dear. I picked you up at the Biltmore Bar because I thought you were attractive and I had nothing better to do. And I made a pass at you for the very same reasons. Now, I don't know what your reasons were, but nobody twisted your arm, made you any promises. So what is this act? Not outrage virtue.
You really are a rat.
Because of this, Sinatra found himself in an identity change, being seen less as the young Hollywood sensation and more as, well, what you know him now as. He was the heavy-drinking, woman-appealing, audaciously gambling chairman of the board, and he owned this image. The Rat Pack would dominate the Vegas scene, being featured in a multitude of films including Ocean's 11, Sergeant's 3, and Robin and the Seven Hoods. The 1960s were once again Sinatra's era, just as he had dominated the 1940s. He received a Grammy, headlined the 1965 Newport Jazz Festival, and released one of his most famous songs ever, Strangers in the Night. And then he just kept going. Summer Wind, Downtown, My Baby Just Cares for Me, That's Life, The Girl from Ipanema, Something Stupid, Drinking Again, and many more. But as his music surged into the field of myth, his personal life sunk like the setting sun over Las Vegas. On December 8, 1963, Frank's only son, Frank Sinatra Jr., would be kidnapped at the age of 19. The kidnappers would demand $240,000, expected to be worth $2.29 million today. That money would be given, and Sinatra Jr. would be released 2 days later. What's even more bizarre, Sinatra would originally offer $1 million to begin with, but the kidnappers, for whatever reason, declined the offer. To put that in perspective, instead of $2.29 million in today's money, they would have received $9.68 million. It wouldn't matter anyway, as Barry Keenan, Johnny Irwin, and Joe Amsler would be captured and sentenced to massive prison sentences. During the entire kidnapping process, all communication was done strictly through payphone. As Sinatra negotiated the release of his son, he often worried that he would run out of coins to continue the conversation. This thus led him to always carrying a roll of dimes with him at all times. As the identity of Sinatra continued to shift, so too did his headlines. Before, he was often in the headlines for breaking records, starring in movies, and stealing the hearts of many. In the 1960s, he was in the headlines for breaking records, starring in movies, and stealing the hearts of many, and also being a lead donator and campaigner for the Kennedy administration, and also saying he hated the Beatles and believed they would die in New York, and also hosting parties in the Vegas casinos after shows. He got in many fights over his casino credit lines, and on one occasion, he was punched in the mouth so hard it knocked the caps off his 2 front teeth. It's safe to say that Sinatra wasn't done yet and still had a lot left to show the world. And then he was done.
I'm in the autumn of the year. I think I swallowed a shot glass.
If you know Sinatra, I'm sure there are a few songs you've definitely heard before. But there was one song in particular that tells the story of a man who owned the world. A song that would transcend his career into a caliber that is undefinable. A song that, frankly put, was done his way. In November 1967, the top French pop song on the charts would be Comme d'habitude. I hope I pronounced that right. Created by these amazing artists, Paul Anka, a Canadian-American songwriter and performer, would soon catch wind of the beautiful piece of music while on holiday in southern France. Okay, Paul Anka. Oh my god, I love this song. Put your hat. Immediately, he flew to Paris to negotiate the rights to the song. Successfully doing so, he held onto it for a couple years, hoping that one day he could recreate the success the song had in France with English lyrics. 2 years later, Anka found himself having dinner with none other than Frank Sinatra and, according to him, a couple of mob guys. During this fateful dinner, Sinatra would say, "I'm quitting the business. I'm sick of it. I'm getting the hell out." When Anka got back to New York soon after, he immediately got to work, rewriting the French lyrics and subtly altering the melodic structure. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, Paul Anka would create one of the most notorious songs in history. Quote, "I sat down at an old IBM electric typewriter and said, if Frank were writing this, what would he say? And I started, metaphorically, and now the end is near. I read a lot of periodicals, and I noticed everything was my this and my that. We were in the me generation, and Frank became the guy for me to use to say that. I used words I would never use. I ate it up and I spit it out. But that's the way he talked. I used to be around steam rooms with the Rat Pack guys. They liked to talk like mob guys, even though they would have been scared of their own shadows." 4 hours later, the song would be finished. He would call up Sinatra while he was at Caesar's Palace and tell him, "I've got something really special for you." And in one take, Sinatra recorded the song, It seemed as though after this recording, Sinatra was on the way out once again in the American music scene. In 1970, Sinatra found himself in another debacle in Vegas, one that would end up being the last straw with his stay at Caesar's Palace. During an argument about casino credit, Sanford Waterman pulled a gun on Sinatra in the middle of the casino. The police threatened to throw Sinatra in jail, and the event would end up unraveling in 1971. The time of Sinatra was over, and in 1971, he retired, a proper send-off as My Way continued to break records. And then he unretired in 1973. He released the album Old Blue Eyes Is Back, reaching 13 on the Billboard and becoming a massive success. He would return to Caesar's Palace in January of 1974, and it would be as if he never left. He continued to sell out shows, got in press trouble while on tour in Australia, and got involved in politics even more. He supported Nixon and Reagan, swore himself to the Republican Party, and even filed a $1 million lawsuit towards a land developer who used his name in Los Angeles. And if you were worried about his music-making abilities, don't fret, because in 1980, when he was 64 years old, he released the triple album trilogy, Past, Present, Future. It would get 6 Grammy nominations, peaked at 17 on the Billboard, and spawned one of his most famous songs, Theme from New York, New York. He would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from none other than President Reagan in 1985. He then performed in Brazil, breaking the record for the largest paid audience ever recorded to see a performer, and to top it all off, was given the Order of the Leopard and named an honorary tribal chief in Botswana. So finally, after all this, the 1990s rolled around.
One word says it all. Sinatra. May 15th through the 19th in 5 shows. Radio City Music Hall proudly presents Frank Sinatra, live in concert on the great stage. Tickets are on sale now at the Music Hall box office and Ticketmaster, or charge by phone at 307-7171.
It's got to be a technical aid. It has to be. I'm sure it's in the new RNA rulebook.
With a swarm of young listeners, Sinatra would continue to sell out crowds, break records, and continuously perform. In 1995, to celebrate Sinatra's 80th birthday, the Empire State Building glowed blue. His birthday tribute would be held on the other side of the country at Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. And at the end of the program, Sinatra would sing his final notes in front of an audience, ironically to the theme of New York, New York.
New York,
This is a special report from ABC News.
I'm Mark Mullen at ABC News World. New York. We have just gotten word that Frank Sinatra, the romantic balladeer, died of a heart attack in Los Angeles. He was 82 years old.
Hey, Nick, but you do those dishes without me.
You don't have to help me. I like dirty dishes. It's very pretty.
Isn't it, though?
Time after time, I tell myself that I'm so lucky to be loving you. So lucky to be the one you run to see in the evening when the day is through.
On May 14th, 1998, Frank Sinatra would die from a heart attack. At 82, with his wife by his side, it was reported that the star's final words were something that he most likely had never said before in his life. As his heart was starting to give out on him, riddled from years of drinking and smoking, he leaned over to his wife and said, "I'm losing." At his burial, friends and family would leave mementos in his casket, the most famous being a roll of dimes in his coat pocket. On his tombstone, "The best is yet to come," was engraved. The game of golf is one that has been around far longer than Frank Sinatra. But what the two have in common is a sense of beauty that is rare in life. While one racks up a water bill and the other a bar tab, it's metaphorical to say the least that both have control over even those at the top. It doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, or how much money you have, at the end of the day, golf will make you follow its rules. It didn't matter who you thought you were, Frank Sinatra owned the American entertainment industry throughout the 20th century. Both titans in their respective spheres, yet both have so much in common. And when the two meet, history is made. A huge thank you to my supporters on Ko-fi. You guys truly mean the world to me. Thank you for letting me do YouTube my way. You can find all my sources in the description of the video. Thank you all for your support.
My name is Harry
And thank you for watching.
We're America's oldest continuously operated jazz supper club, almost a half a century old now. You are engaged tonight in an historic moment. I can look back here upon the orchestra and I can honestly say that you are seeing one of the swingingest bands.